Welcome to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are ready to get out of survival mode so they can focus on what matters most. This is where the burnout stops and the real talk starts. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Carter, and each week I sit down with healthcare innovators who get it. We will unpack the chaos, laugh through the hard stuff, and get you at least 2 practical tips you can use at work right away. If you're ready to clear the chaos and lead with impact, you've come to the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are done with overwhelming workloads and burnout. This podcast is built around the big idea that you are not meant to prove your worth through exhaustion. We help you get out of survival mode by discussing your real-world pain points and giving you at least 2 practical tips you can put in place right away. Today's guest is Dr. Andrea Coyle, who currently serves as the Chief Clinical and Innovation Officer at Joymetrics, formerly known as SE Healthcare. And there, Andrea brings evidence-based strategies to mitigate the burnout epidemic in healthcare. She is also a podcast hostess, and her podcast is called The Shift with Dr. Andrea Coyle, which is a weekly show that delves deep into the world of nursing, offering listeners an intimate look at the experiences, challenges, and triumphs of healthcare professionals. Her podcast aims to inspire, educate, and empower both current and aspiring nurses. Dr. Coyle is also a renowned nursing leader and advocate, and I am so excited for her to join us today. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Megan, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm just also so excited to call you friend, colleague, peer, nurse leader. So Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for this conversation. So what I like to start with most of my guests is I like to ask you guys about your chaos experience, because that's what we're all about on this show. So if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe what's been your most chaotic moment in healthcare leadership.
Thank you for asking that question, Megan. And as you can imagine, and for the folks listening, there's more than one.
Absolutely.
But this one just kind of sticks in my brain. I was driving to work. I was the manager of a medical intensive care unit, 23 bed, very large. And on the way to work, I received a call from the VP of nursing, who was my accountable leader at the time. And we had a night shift nurse, Megan, that was found unresponsive in the bathroom, diverting fentanyl. And it was one of us found in the bathroom unresponsive. So, of course, there was a rapid response called on one of our own. In the meantime, we had 2 call-outs, which is an ICU or any care delivery environment. It was awful. And so on the way to work, my heart is already racing. I'm so upset about one of ours being down. We're short 2, and my phone's blowing up. Staffing's calling. Ring, 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 ring. And we had a frustrated family member. And when I stepped into the unit, immediately people were just coming at me. My team, the physicians that responded, the physicians that worked in our unit. And of course, everybody was concerned, and there was just a lot of emotion. And so that was very exhausting. And I didn't even mention, Megan, that I had 5 meetings scheduled that day, 2 of which I was chairing. And when you asked me to be on the podcast and I started thinking of some of the moments, even when I relive and tell that story, I get like a visceral response of how it felt that day. Like I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I felt like I was having chest tightness. And that's one of my stories, Megan.
That is so intense. First of all, I'm so sorry you experienced that. And it's heartbreaking. And, moments like that, it feels like when it rains, it pours. Like it's not just, we're trying to tell people who are outside of the healthcare industry, and I'm trying to describe the experience of these leaders. It's, maybe they assume there's 1 or 2 issues. It's like, no, it's always all at once. And it's always at the worst possible time when you've got multiple responsibilities. And you mentioned too, the trauma and the trigger of that. We store our trauma and our emotions in our body, in our nervous system, and our muscles. Part of that nervous system work that we talk about, and I know you've got some great practices too, is how to release that. And that's really hard when you're the leader, because you yourself are a human being experiencing the trauma, but you're also responsible for the other 20, 30 people who are experiencing it. And so often, nobly and altruistically, the leaders put the staff first, but very rarely do leaders really take the time to process it for themselves. And so I'm so grateful we're having this conversation today, because I think it's way more common than people assume. And I think it's so important to be vulnerable and transparent and help people understand it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to feel that way. You know what I mean? So
Yes,
intense.
it is. It's very intense. And I often feel like when we're able to be vulnerable and have these discussions, it also helps release that we're not alone in these feelings, because sometimes you can isolate yourself.
Right.
And that can really head in the wrong direction.
And don't you think, has it been your perception too, as we work with clients around the country, don't you think it's fear of being seen as weak or incompetent, which is so disappointing and heartbreaking, because you're a whole human being showing up at work. Leaders are often seen as their job title and not who they are as a person. And I think over time, our fear of being seen, whether it's our senior leaders or our peers or our staff, we don't want to be seen as weak or unstable. And yet we know one of the most radically powerful, impactful things is to just be vulnerable and transparent as a leader. That builds trust so quickly. I think it's Patrick Lencioni's book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. I quote him a lot. And he says the most powerful way to build trust on a team is to demonstrate vulnerability first. And that makes so many healthcare leaders uncomfortable, but it works. It's really powerful. So thank you for, yeah.
You're welcome. And thank you for allowing me to have this space to share. And I feel like, when we're able to talk about it, it doesn't show weakness. It shows human.
Yes.
We are humans.
Yep.
Back in the day when everyone, nurses are superheroes, we're humans. We're not superheroes. We're humans.
Yeah.
And we have to sometimes step back and embrace the fact that it's okay not to be okay. My great friend, Bob Dent, teaches me that all the time.
Yes.
And it's okay to have these feelings. But when we don't talk about it and we don't build those meaningful connections, we go back to what I just mentioned, the isolation of feeling like it's only me. And then you start to back your own self into a corner or into a box.
Yep. 100%. I love that we're having this conversation. And yes, shout out to Bob Dent. He's amazing. You guys need to follow him as well. So let's talk about, so we had, obviously you're similar to me, kind of had that traditional leadership path. What inspired you to pivot from that path to now being an innovator around burnout and leadership development?
Again, just like you, I was on the traditional leadership path. Got my NEBC, had my master's, was getting my DNP, getting published, speaking, AONL, ANA, doing all these great things. And I was like, I really got this. I felt like everything was going well. In the organization where I worked, we were magnet designated. We had PTAP, we had a beacon units, and everything was going well. Our quality metrics, experience, all of our performance metrics were above the benchmark. We did have some opportunity, but we were outperforming the majority. Yet quietly behind the scenes, myself and many of my colleagues were quietly unraveling. And as we were unraveling, presented in, burnout presents differently. Some people were exhausted. Some people were cynical, critical. Some people felt like venting. And these venting sessions then turned into gossip sessions, complaining sessions that were just sucking the energy out of us, contributing back to that exhaustion.
Yeah.
And then often many of us felt lack of self-efficacy. We'd go home and work and think to ourselves, what's the use? And so what happened was I had this epiphany. Why do we measure our patient experience, our patient quality, our patient safety, our nurse and employee engagement, yet we don't measure our own burnout?
Yeah.
And it's the people that move the metric.
Yeah.
And our former Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, in 2022 put out a call to action and said, we've got to measure, monitor, meaningfully manage burnout the exact same way we do with all of our quality metrics. It is a call to action. It is paramount. And we have to be transparent with the data, and we have to create action plans that help us move the needle. And I stumbled across SE Healthcare, now is Joymetrics. And I was actually, I didn't stumble across them. They reached out to me and said, would you be willing to provide some content? And I said, sure. And I didn't really know anything about SE Healthcare. And I started reading some of their already developed content. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is me. I'm a cynical, critical person. My burnout, that's how my burnout presents. And I'm cynical and critical about myself as others. And I felt this way when I'd go to work, and then I'd carry that little burnout in a suitcase back to my house. I'd get home. As a great leader, I'd sit down and reflect. And I thought to myself, I was so ugly today. I was not my best. So I feel bad about it. And then I was caught in this vicious cycle. So I'd go back to work the next day, and it was the same thing. I went to EAP. It took a while to get into EAP. But when I went to EAP, Megan, I literally cried buckets for one straight hour and realized I was burned out. And a pivotal moment was the education piece and recognizing that these are the symptoms and this is how I can help fix it. And oh, by the way, I want to help the people helping the people with burnout so that we can elevate our profession, continue to elevate our profession.
Yeah. And you do that so well. Remind me, how long have you been with Joymetrics?
It'll be 4 years next month.
That's amazing. Congratulations. So now
Thank
you're
you.
hearing is you had your own pain point, your own journey, and that has inspired you to now go out and help others through that as well. And it is such a need. That's such a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
You
When you
bet.
talked about when you talked about going home with it, it reminds me, I think of the term boundaries. And boundaries is one of the pillars in my framework, and it's what we talk about. And everybody in healthcare struggles with boundaries. First leaders, especially, I think it's extra complicated for us because we are a helping profession, because we are raised in this culture of self sacrifice, put others first, which is noble and absolutely is a core part of our identity. However, don't you think it's kind of gotten to the point where we have no boundaries? We say yes to everything and it starts to take over our lives. Why do you think, Andrea, because you're working with so many people, why do you think boundaries are such a challenge for healthcare leaders?
There's a couple of challenges. Number one, there's not enough time in the day.
Mm,
And think about this. And shout out to all the nurse managers who really have one of the most difficult roles in the house.
love that.
They're straddling sometimes direct patient care and they're in leadership. And what happens is, first of all, their span of control is ginormous. When you're the accountable leader for 85 or 100 people, you can't remain consistent because you can't say yes to one person and not say yes to the other person. You can't answer one person's email without answering all the emails. And all that starts to compound and it's hard to set the boundary. And then when you go home, you're like, if I could just answer 5 more emails to get somewhat caught up and feel better and take a deep breath, those 5 emails turned into 25. And then before you know it, in my real life, my daughter was having a conversation with me and she said, Mom, you're on your phone. You didn't hear one word I said. And I was like, oof.
Yeah.
So what I've realized is you don't have to answer every email and not every email is urgent.
Yeah.
And so you have to reset. Like I have to reset myself multiple times a day.
Yeah. I love that you said that because what you described. So there's this infographic I created and I like it because I call it the wheel of invisible boundaries. And there's like 15 different invisible boundaries. One of them is availability. So what happens when you don't have that boundary, when it remains invisible? I'm answering my emails, I'm answering my phone, every little thing. There's also an emotional labor invisible boundary. So how much I'm taking on other people's emotions and feeling without even realizing it, feeling ownership for managing those feelings, whether it's a patient, their family, our staff, whoever. There are so many examples. And it's interesting to me when the leaders are responding to and identifying which of those apply to them. And many people say, well, all of these. And the point that we're making is, well, if it's an invisible boundary, no wonder people are violating it. No wonder you feel overwhelmed and frustrated. So step one in my mind is you have to say your boundaries out loud in a very collaborative way. So we teach people how to do that, but it feels to me like it's universal. There are very few people who say, yes, I hold clear boundaries and I feel good about it. There's usually 1 or 2 in a group of 100. And it's usually because they've been a leader for 20 plus years. And like you just described, they hit a wall and realized if I'm going to continue in this role, I have to have these boundaries. We don't want people to get to that place. We don't want them to break. How can we start instilling these boundaries, as part of their education, as part of their onboard, normalizing that? So that's such a powerful conversation. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, happy to.
I am so glad you're a burnout expert because, as you well know, the struggle is so real for our listeners who are leading in these broken systems. You once shared with me this phrase that you use to address burnout. Can you share with the listeners what name it, claim it, tame it means? Because I think that's such a memorable and powerful phrase.
Name it before it builds. So it's a quick mental check, Megan, is what it is. And I'm tired, I'm overloaded, I feel frustrated, everything feels urgent or important. And when you're able to label that, what you're feeling, when you can label what you're feeling, it reduces the intensity and it helps you respond instead of react. So, when you name it, you have to be able to name it and say, I am frustrated right now. And I know that my frustration contributes to exhaustion. And exhaustion is one of the 3 cardinal symptoms of burnout. So now that I've named it and it has a label on it, then I can start to figure out what is it right now in this moment that's causing this frustration. And sometimes going back to it's the emails. Good grief. We all have a ton of emails, but how many of them are important versus urgent?
Right.
A lot of it's just a lot of mental toughness and mental agility.
Right. Right. Absolutely. We talked about this before the show, but I think it's important to differentiate between burnout, overload, PTSD. So for those who aren't aware of some of the differences in the definitions, can you kind of walk us through that a little bit, that thought process?
It's the overload. The overload is, and some of it's self-induced.
Yeah.
Some,
Oh, sure.
some of it is self-induced, but the overload is what I described in that chaotic moment. You walk into your office, no matter what your role is. And even if you walk into the clinical care delivery environment, you've already created this, honestly, sometimes unrealistic checklist. And that's the overload. And we have to really step back and say, what does good look like? Not just what perfect look like, but what does good look like? Not perfect, because we cannot always go for perfect. We have to lower the volume on perfection. That's
Yeah.
something else I'd like to talk about. And then the PTSD is, it's funny. Sometimes when I talk about these stories, I actually can start to remember how it felt when I would have those moments sitting in my desk thinking, I have so much to do. I literally don't even know where to start.
Sure. Yeah.
And I like to use Eisenhower's matrix. It's a prioritization tool,
Yeah.
what's important and what's urgent. And it helps you kind of figure out, especially for nurse managers, where are you going to spend your energy? Are you
Yeah.
going to conserve or waste energy today?
Yeah. Yeah. And even pausing just for a minute or 2 minutes when you're
Hmm.
that busy feels like you're slowing your day down. But if you can pause just for a minute or two and think that way, like pull yourself up to that 30,000 foot view, you can be so much more impactful, and you can disconnect from work a little more easily because you've given yourself, what are the 3 bare minimum things I need to check off my list today? Not 30, not all 300, but just 3. You also mentioned the definitions too. What I've understood is, from a nervous system perspective, tell me if I'm right, stress is something sudden, acute, and then it resolves. So something happens, there's a loud noise, there's confrontation, my sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Once the conflict or whatever it is over, my parasympathetic takes back over, I get back to baseline. Whereas overload is, my sympathetic nervous system is 10 out of 10 all day, every day for weeks, months, years, which I think is more accurate to your point to describe experience of healthcare leaders. Eat 1 week of PTO in a Caribbean destination is not going to fix a nervous system that is that dysregulated. And then I think of PTSD as, okay, now we have a full trauma experience. There are people who are far more expert at this, but that has its own sequela and its own diagnostics and its own manifestation in our bodies. Point being, connecting with someone, if you're feeling dysregulated and your usual techniques aren't working, it might be time to seek some help so someone can help diagnose it, talk through it with you so you can treat yourself specifically for the issue. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think everything you said is well said. The other thing that I didn't mention is, which I find to be helpful, I call it shrink the day. So instead of coming to work and thinking about what's going to happen at 3 o'clock, what's going to happen on Thursday, what's going to happen next week, next month, focus on the hour that you're in. And that helps stop some of the overload, because you're overloading yourself with really things that are out of your control. But what you can control is what's in that hour versus 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, next week, next month. So shrink the day is something that I have to remind myself almost daily, literally.
Yeah. I love that mindset shift. So far we've heard shrink the day. I also heard you say turn the volume down on perfection. Tell us a little bit more about that mindset shift.
Well, burnout's all or nothing. And that's why we're all leaders. Like, we're all or nothing. And it's often more important to aim for effective versus flawless.
Right.
Because we're humans and we're creating these expectations that we may never meet. So we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. So that's why I just say, just lower the volume a little bit on the perfection. We're not all here to be perfect. And in fact, if you think about the true guiding principle of a high reliability organization, deferring to the expert, same thing with the shared governance model, defer to the expert. We don't have to be perfect in everything. That's why we have teams. So defer to your team members that are the experts.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say that, my mind goes to, okay, we know that they're burned out too. And so I think a lot of leaders struggle to delegate or even engage or push because they see how exhausted their own teams are. However, just mindset shift. What does empowerment look like? What does validation look like for them? Like, it doesn't have to be a certain way. We can get creative with our teams, knowing where they're at mentally and emotionally because we're in tune with them as the leader, versus, just feeling like we're dumping on them. And so I think that mindset shift is so great. When you say turn the volume down on perfection, so tell me what that might look like for me if I'm a nurse manager. What does that look like in my day? Just an example.
If you're a nurse manager and you're trying to be perfect, that means that the schedule's perfect, the linen closet's perfect, all the thermometers in the refrigerators for the medications are perfect, the units all ready for joint commission or whatever your regulatory body is. And I'm going to start at 7 o'clock and get out at 5 o'clock. And every single meeting that I run today is going to be perfect. And everyone's going to agree with me on and on and on and on and on. And I'm like exhausted even talking about it because that is
Yeah,
not reality. It's
right.
not reality.
Yeah. So I hear you describing adjusting our expectations of ourselves, which I think is really powerful. And it's applicable to every role. So whether I'm a
Right.
manager, a senior executive, if I'm a supervisor, an educator, all of that it's human, is what it sounds like. Yeah, which I love. Tell me
Yeah.
about tell me about Joymetrics and how they help clients. What are you guys currently offering them, and what are some of the effects, the outcomes that you guys are seeing?
One thing that we're currently offering is what we call a Reignite, Inspire, Support, Empower. We have a human experience where we come on site and we work with the designated people that the organization decides. Often, Megan, it is probably a room of the managers and directors, probably about 85 to 100 people, but the
Yeah.
organization can select. And then they do their self assessment. It's not a survey. We are not surveys. People
Yeah.
are burned out with surveys.
Yep.
And we do the survey, or I'm sorry, we do the assessment to determine the levels of burnout.
Mm.
And then we are able to, by drop down boxes and free text, people can describe what their stressors are that contribute to burnout. We use artificial intelligence. We create a list of what the priorities are, root causes. You have to
Okay.
find the root causes
Yeah.
to the stressors that contribute to the burnout so that you can create prioritized action plans.
Yeah.
And then you gain access to our digital library that has micro learnings, short, easy to use for quick, busy clinicians and leaders. You get continuing education credit, and we continuously monitor burnout the exact same way we measure, monitor, and meaningfully manage patient safety, patient experience, patient quality. It's the same thing. So we truly are a response to what our Surgeon General has implored as paramount.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I remember Dr. Vivek Murthy when he was touring, like, intra and post-pandemic. I love that he was touring, and even though the media had, kind of reduced coverage on it, he continued to shine a light on the ripple effects. Just because the traumatic event itself is over doesn't mean that the effects are over. I mean, even it's been, at least 4 years now, and it's people are still grappling with that mentally, physically, and emotionally. So I love that you guys are offering not just any solution, but it's an individualized, and it's been developed in partnership with the experts, as you mentioned, people who are actually living and breathing it, which is so great.
The other great thing, Megan, that we're doing at Joymetrics is we've partnered with the Mayo Clinic.
Oh,
And
nice.
we're going to take the data from the electronic health record and
Mhm.
be able to predict burnout. So we're going to
Okay.
have qualitative data, quantitative data, and it's going to be amazing. One thing we are actually seeking are design partners.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked the question.
Yeah. What is a design partner? What does that look like if someone's interested?
It would be a chief nursing officer who would be interested in working with Joymetrics and the Mayo Clinic. And we would provide everything that Joymetrics provides alongside what the Mayo Clinic is offering, which is the predictive analytics.
That's so impressive. I love that. So you heard that, listeners. There's opportunity there.
Yeah,
Love, love.
so reach out to me.
That's right. That's right. So we've heard so far the chaos whispering tips are mindset shifts. So turn the volume down on perfection. And then we talked about what Joymetrics offers. So the self-assessments, and I love that it's micro modules because we
Mhm.
module ourselves to death. I love someone who's super busy can take 5 to 7 minutes. They can even do it on their phone, I'm sure, and take it on the go. There's an opportunity to partner with Mayo Clinic and be a design partner in the predictive aspect, which is amazing. Any other chaos whispering practical tips you want to share for burnout or well-being for these leaders?
One thing, just continue leaders, create a culture of burnout awareness because that's the name it, claim it, tame it part. Create that
Yeah.
culture of awareness. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel
Yeah.
like? And if you think about what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, a lot of that is culture. If
Right.
you become familiar with what behaviors of a burned out colleague looks like, and
Right.
that's when we can really begin this healing. It's healing work.
It is. Well, and as the leader, role modeling that vulnerability and being honest, as much as you feel comfortable sharing your own levels of stress and burnout, normalizing that it's okay to talk about it really invites people in so that they don't feel like they have to continue to have this appearance of perfection or everything's fine, I'm just fine. So I think role modeling, even just a little bit of vulnerability is pretty powerful too. So I love that you brought that up.
Yes, thank you.
This has been such a great conversation. We know work is certainly a big part of our lives, especially in healthcare, but it's not our whole experience. So I like to end every episode with a fun question. We all need to be able to experience joy and laughter even outside of work. So I'm asking people right now, where are you going, Andrea, to get laughter in your life right now?
Oh my God, I love that you asked that question. This is just who I am. People watching. People fascinate me. That's why I'm in healthcare. And there are so many unintentional moments. It's like a little luxury in life. There's unintentional moments and people. So both of my kids, I have a 22-year-old and a 21-year-old, both in college. One of them's coming home for a couple of days and there's just going to be so much laughter.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things you have to look for it, notice it, and appreciate it. And
you do. And I know you travel a lot like I do. So do you have any recent people watching observations that are especially funny to you that you want to share? Because I think we're all entertained by it. This is what we do in healthcare. We are observers of human beings, 100%.
Gosh, I know. I mean, other than something that happens, because we both travel a lot. I'm in and out of airports. So I'm in and out of airport bathrooms. And this poor lady came out of the bathroom and she had one of those toilet seats stuck in her pants, those little toilet covers.
Yeah.
And so it was funny, but it wasn't. But here's the thing. The amount of people that let her walk to the sink. And as soon as I noticed it, like I had to help a sister out,
Absolutely.
I'm like, ma'am, I just want you to know. So that was kind of funny, but there are so many funny things. I can't even.
Well, I had this experience. I landed in the Portland airport for the first time a couple weeks ago, working with an amazing client there in Oregon. And as soon as I got off the plane, so I live in Fort Worth, I'm used to the DFW airport. I got off the plane, I walk out, total shift in energy. People are walking around with smiles on their faces. They're in, very laid back, kind of granola, crunchy, like amazing outfits. There are two, not one, but two grand piano players just playing like their own acoustic versions of old 80s pop funk music. Like it was like stepping into another dimension of absolute delight. I walked so slow through that airport because I could not stop turning my head and just taking it all in. I love Portland. I will definitely be back. But that airport experience immediately, the people watching was almost overwhelming because there were just so many interesting characters and all positive. There was nothing negative at all, but it was just one of those, man, this is the energy I want to be around in airports. Why can't they all be like this?
Megan, it's really funny. Don't you feel like there's just so much? I always tell people this. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. So Atlanta is probably like your DFW.
Yeah.
Because I have to go through Atlanta. And I always tell people, Atlanta's my second home. I have the most meals at the Atlanta airport.
Right.
I know that airport like the back of my hand. And some of the people there are now my friends. Like, I have to tell you, if I have a big, long layover, sometimes I'll go grab a massage. Well, I have a certain guy, Larry, who always gives me my massage and he makes me laugh.
Yes. So self-care and laughter all in one package, which is amazing, especially when you're flying because it's stressful. I love that. That's such a great example. I love it. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you and I share the same passion and vision for helping to heal our broken healthcare system, specifically so these precious leaders can thrive. And I am confident that your strategies that you shared will absolutely help so many of our listeners. And thank you for tuning in, amazing listeners. Each of Andrea's strategies and tips can be found in the show notes if you need to go back and check those out. And if people want to connect with you, Andrea, afterwards, where would you like to direct them? Where can they find you?
They can reach out to me on my email. It's alc@joymetrics.com. And I'll be honest with you, if somebody wants to text me, 843-5, I am crystal clear on my assignment from my Almighty, and this is my jam.
Yeah, I can tell it's something you're passionate about. Love that. Love that availability. And just so you know, folks, you can also find links to connect with her directly in the show notes. So thanks for tuning in. Cheers to each and every one of you, fellow Chaos Whisperers. Thanks for joining us on the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to follow this podcast, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. I'm Dr. Megan Carter, and I will be back next week with more real talk, fresh strategies, and guests who are redefining what it means to lead with impact. Want to keep the conversation going? Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and download free tools and resources from my website. Both links are in the show notes. Let's heal this broken healthcare system together, one day at a time.